Hello everyone, I am Excelbum and welcome to this episode of Advanced Wars Academy, where I discuss strategic concepts and advice that will help you improve your Advanced Wars PvP. In Advanced Wars, there are three units that should make the majority of your army: the tank, the battlecopter, and the anti-air. The tank is a staple unit of any Advanced Wars match and is effective against many common early game units, such as infantry, recons, and anti-air. The battlecopter is a flying unit with high mobility and it counters the tank, dealing considerable damage while taking almost nothing in return. And the anti-air counters the battlecopter but is in turn countered by tanks. These three units form Advanced Wars' so-called weapon triangle. At first glance, these all seem like hard counters. Tanks effectively cannot even attack battlecopters, while battlecopters will be one-shot by anti-air, while anti-air will always lose in an even engagement with tanks. If you make just one of these units, you'll be at a huge disadvantage against an opponent with a more balanced composition. However, this does not mean that you should make tanks, battlecopters, and anti-air in a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. And this is because, in most realistic PvP scenarios, this weapon triangle is not equilateral. The degree to which these units counter one another is unequal, and generally is weighted more towards tanks. This is because most Advanced Wars games will begin with both players making a large amount of infantry to capture properties, and possibly some recon to scout or harass those infantry. Tanks are frequently the best early game skirmishing unit because they are cheap at 7,000 funds, making it easier to get them sooner and in larger quantities in the mid-game. Anti-air can also fulfill a skirmishing role, but they cost more at 8,000 funds and are generally worse at fighting ground enemies, except for infantry which they can kill in one hit. Battlecopters cost 9,000 funds each, making it harder to get them early on or amass large quantities of them. Additionally, many maps only have one airport compared to 2 or 3 bases, making it impossible on some maps to build more than one per turn. In comparison, you'll be able to make 3 tanks per turn on most maps. These airports are also sometimes farther away and harder to access early on. Tanks also have a better profit to risk ratio when you attack. When you use a tank to attack a priority target, such as an enemy tank or an anti-air, you can do around half a tank or 3,000 to 4,000 funds worth of damage, while risking the same amount in return for one attack from an enemy tank or battlecopter. However, battlecopters are a lot more risky. If you attack, you can deal around the same amount of damage to a tank, but you risk the entire battlecopter when attacked by an enemy battlecopter or anti-air. Battlecopters will absolutely cripple other battlecopters, knocking them down to 1 or 2 HP, and anti-air will just completely destroy them outright. For this reason, you can fight off quite a few enemy battlecopters with a relatively small number of your own anti-air or battlecopters. For a good rule of thumb, each of your anti-air can defend your army against 2 enemy battlecopters each. You can even do well against enemy battlecopters with a damaged anti-air. For instance, a 3 HP anti-air can take nearly half of the HP off of an enemy battlecopter, making it ineffective in a fight. In turn, if there are no enemy battlecopters, anti-air will generally do pretty pathetically against enemy tanks, so getting too many won't do you much good. So going back to the weapon triangle, we can see that the degree of effectiveness of these counters is unequal. Battlecopters don't counter tanks that hard, while anti-air will absolutely wreck battlecopters, and tanks will dominate anti-air in a similar fashion. So to summarize, tanks can be amassed in large numbers to do great things against things that your opponent is guaranteed to have, such as infantry or recons. Battlecopters which counter tanks don't do so super effectively and are often rate limited and risky. And anti-air are mainly only effective against battlecopters, which are inherently less common in other units because of the cost and number of production facilities. Arguably, in many cases, the actual best counter to tanks is having more tanks. The same can be said about battlecopters, which will do great against enemy battlecopters on their first strike. Unfortunately, anti-air can't even fight each other very well, which is kinda sad. And so this is why Advanced Wars' weapon triangle of unit counters is unbalanced, or rather skewed. You don't want to make a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of tanks to battlecopters to anti-air, because if you do so, you aren't leaning into the inherent advantage of the tank in this triangle, and you'll be at a disadvantage against someone who does. I would generally recommend more along the lines of a 6 to 2 to 1 ratio of tanks to battlecopters to anti-air as a general rule of thumb. However, you might want to make some adjustments to these numbers depending on the map. Any map-specific feature that strengthens or weakens one part of the triangle affects all three of the units. For instance, the positioning and number of airports on the map is very important. If there are 2 airports on the map, you might want to invest more into anti-air or battlecopters of your own. If the airport is more forwardly positioned, then battlecopters will generally be stronger because they can reach the fight sooner. Similarly, if the airport is farther away from the fight, air units will be weaker. Some maps also have bases positioned in a way that makes it difficult for anti-air to reach the front quickly, meaning that battlecopters are inherently stronger. Some CO matchups will change this dynamic. For instance, if you play as Eagle, your own battlecopters will be much stronger than your opponent's, so you can afford to get fewer anti-air while your opponent is forced to make more. If you play at Fog of War, battlecopters are both riskier and more effective in this triangle. This is because your opponent generally won't be able to see them coming unless they predict it. And you can potentially catch them by surprise and wreak havoc on their ground forces with impunity. However, on the flip side, if your opponent has anti-air or battlecopters of their own, they can ambush you and counter reckless battlecopter aggression and deal a significant blow to your army. These are things that you should think about when deciding which units you want to make. If you see your opponent making mainly tanks, consider either trying to match their tank count or getting more battlecopters. If they have a lot of battlecopters, consider making anti-air or battlecopters of your own. If they have a lot of anti-air, just make more tanks. Anti-air don't really counter each other, so you don't gain that much by having an equal amount of them. Thanks for watching. I'm experimenting with this as a new series, and if you would like to see more of this content, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.